It's my privilege now to introduce you to Maddie, Rue, Sarah, and Paul in the Wow Factor, crafting unforgettable customer experiences. This goes beyond just the experience of everyday customer interaction. This is making meaningful impact. I'm super pumped for this. Maddie is our host. So Maddie, I will pass it over to you.
Awesome.
Take it
Thank
away.
you. Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I know I speak for everybody on the panel with me today when we say we're so excited for you guys to be here. But before we get started and we dive in, I want us to be honest. We're in a safe space. We're all here together to learn. So we all know that demos are really what wins the deal, right? Like the demos, if your demo kind of stinks, if you kind of really miss the mark, it doesn't matter how exceptional your mutual close plan is. It doesn't matter how multi-threaded the opportunity is. It's probably going to be a lost opportunity. So if you actually approach those demos with a strategic mind, with a thoughtful mind, with a tailored approach, that's really where those wow moments happen. That's when you turn the wows into wins. And so if you've ever asked yourself, how do I up level my demos? How do I actually create this wow experience? How do I approach all of my preps and all of my demos with this kind of like wow idea in mind, how to take it a couple steps further and really tailor that approach? You are definitely in the right spot. So my amazing panel is here today to really help you figure out some tips and tricks. We're going to share some stories on how to really make those demos unforgettable. So before we jump in, I know you guys are here to learn from us, but I'm sure that you all have tips and some stories as well to share. So if you do have something, we'd love to hear about it in the chat, or you can go out into LinkedIn and use the hashtag PSCWowDemo and share your tips, share your tricks. We can follow along and just kind of interact with each other on that as well. I think it would be really great for everybody to kind of learn some amazing stories beyond just what we're seeing in the panel today. So before we jump in, I'm going to introduce myself and then have everybody just 30 seconds or less introduce themselves. I'm Maddie. I am the head of sales engineering. My Wisconsin just came out there, head. I'm the head of sales engineering at 360 Learning. I have been in ed tech and SaaS for my entire career. I initially started in implementation and support and spent about 6 years there. And then I moved over into the sales engineering role. And then I kind of found this opportunity at 360 Learning and I took a jump. I was the first SE in North America, and now I've grown the team. And it's just been really incredible to kind of see that progression grow. And a lot of it has to do with the PreSales Collective. I kind of threw myself into professional development in 2020. And I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to introduce herself. But before I do that, I just want to kind of give Sarah a special little shout out because she was actually my first sales engineer manager. So she kind of helped me build and like lay the foundation for sales engineering in that role and getting me into it. I think she had a conversation with me and she was like, you realize you're a sales engineer, right? Like this is what you should be doing. And she kind of directed me to the PreSales Collective to dig in more. So Sarah, I'll give it over to you for a sec.
Thanks, Maddie. I appreciate it. Thanks for that intro too. My name's Sarah Paul. I'm a solution consultant at DocuSign. I started out my career actually working in public education. I spent about 15 years working in public schools in IT roles, training roles, things of that nature. So I was actually sitting on the other side of the table, listening to demonstrations take place, watching people stumble through and commit all sorts of demo crimes. And now I'm on the other side of that coin, really doing product demonstrations. I've been a solution consultant, solution engineer, whatever we're calling ourselves these days for nearly 10 years now. And I'm really excited for this session and to learn from Rue and Paul. So with that, I want to kick things over to Rue.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So I'm just here because Maddie invited me and I follow her on LinkedIn and it's awesome. So if you're not following her on LinkedIn, you should be. But yeah, I'll just introduce myself real quick. I was an engineer. I moved into sales engineering and then I moved into sales, the dark side, as we call it. I now run a pre-sales training company called Alpha Pre-Sales. It's the training that I needed as a sales engineer, but that I never received because unlike David's presentation was fantastic, but presentations weren't my problem when I was starting off. I was actually good at presentations. I just wasn't good at sales. So I would do what a lot of sales engineers do. I would get a question, and then it would take me 10 minutes to answer the question because I would say, oh, that's a great question. It depends. And then I give them 15 different options and confuse the client. So I wanted to create training that fixes that problem and along with some of the other ones like lack of discovery and good listening and other things. And now Alpha PreSales does that. It's used by big companies, NICE, In Contact, OutSystems, and others. And my goal is to take technical resources that we're known as and bring them to become truly trusted advisors. So if you want that training, I have bad news for you. I do not sell to individuals, but everything I do is for free. You can just follow me on LinkedIn or join the Alpha Pre-Sales community, and you can get free content for yourself. So just tell your boss about me if you like my stuff, because I'd love to see you at the next sales kickoff. With that, I'm going to kick it to Mr. Paul Vidal.
Thanks, Rue. So I started doing demo before pre-sales existed. Kind of started where, hey, you think you know what this product is doing, why don't you go talk to a customer? So that's kind of what I had started. And since then, I've been in SE organization my entire career, building SEs, being an SE as an individual contributor. About 3 years ago, I joined Reprise, who is a demo creation company, because it was kind of in the field that I was doing. So I'm really excited about this panel. I think spending 3 years working with people that are trying to solve this demo problem has been super insightful. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and we're going to start in kind of an ironic way. So our goal here today is to talk about unforgettable experiences, but I think we need to acknowledge that there are definitely forgettable experiences. So to kind of get us started, Sarah, you had mentioned that you've watched a lot of demos, so I'm just going to pass it on over to you to kind of talk about your forgettable demo experiences, and then we'll just kind of round robin it and then move on.
Sounds great. Thanks, Maddie. I think probably the most forgettable experiences for me include ones where either the presenter is on a different planet altogether, so they're talking about something that really is not aligned to what we're here to do today, or they just don't have the purpose figured out. And sometimes when we're in those roles as solution consultants or solution engineers working towards a demonstration, we don't have decent enough discovery, we haven't done our homework, we're in a place where we're alienating the audience as well. So having been on the receiving end of that, one particular story that sticks out is a presenter that came in to demonstrate some sort of software. I've clearly forgotten what it was, so that was obviously forgettable. And they went on and on and on in their opening about how their airline travel to our site was so incredibly difficult. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this going to tie into the demonstration? And it literally didn't. The person stopped their story, their little rant, and then they sort of like went into scene and began their introduction. So that was clearly not hitting the mark for me, because they had wasted about 10 minutes of our time during that demonstration.
Yeah, that's what am I doing here kind of question. I think that's whenever I have somebody talking to me and I'm like, what is the purpose of this? That's going to be definitely forgettable for me. Paul, do you have anything that you want to kind of chime in on there?
Yeah, so that definitely didn't happen to me. It happened to me. What happened is I was once working with one of the largest bank in America. Their name starts with bank and end with America. And I was sure that I was going to talk to the data governance team. And I spent like days working on this demo. And I had like this sliver of discovery. And then I just went deep dive thinking this is what I was going to do. So I spent probably like a week tailoring these demos for this data governance use case and starting the demo. And it took me about like perhaps 30 minutes to realize that it was the data security team, not the data governance team, which was a completely different demo. So the 30 minutes, I'm like, I feel like I'm losing you. What's going on? So yeah, they don't remember me, and I don't think they're inviting me again. So just don't do that.
Don't do that. Good words of advice there. Rue, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, look, I like to watch demos and presentations when I'm eating lunch. So if I could watch your presentation while eating lunch, then it's not really a good presentation. So you should be blowing up the chat. You should be interacting and asking me questions, because otherwise I'd rather you just record it and send it to me. So with that, if anyone wants to drop any bad, forgettable presentation recommendations in the chat, go for it. But yeah, that's it. If I can't remember it, it's forgettable.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of moving on to the forgettable kind of idea, I think if we've all heard this phrase of just do what you did last time, which kind of does lead itself to being a forgettable experience. I think we all kind of have feelings. I know I have feelings around being told just do what you did last time, because that really doesn't hit the mark for our clients, even if they're in the same vertical, even if they're the exact same purpose, right? Same company, they're competitors. They're not going to have the same pains. They're not going to have the same needs. They're not going to have the same vision of where they're going. So doing what you did last time just isn't going to work. So, Rue, why don't I go ahead and start with you and just say, can you tell us why you're so passionate, if you will, about like kind of crafting these custom experiences that keep you engaged, that you just don't have to like watch a recording?
Yeah, it's ultimately software is so competitive right now. And if you just watch any company's website, it's going to change every 3 months. And the marketing team is going to, all right, to put it bluntly, lie about what the product does. And every product looks exactly the same. So if you are the lowest price competitor, then just do the demo exactly as is. But otherwise, when you just do the generic demo, you look like everyone else in your industry, and then the customer picks the cheapest one. So you can do it, just if you're trying to charge any more than the bare minimum, it's probably not the best move.
Right. It totally. And Sarah, your kind of notes here about standing out. So I'm going to kind of pass it over to you to just kind of continue on Rue's kind of idea of if you want to be different, then, you got to stand out.
Somehow you have to stand out, and somehow you have to be memorable or unforgettable. And that can happen in a number of different ways, but being dry or missing the mark entirely is not the way to do that. Sometimes when I'm asked to just do what I've done last time, an analogy or a little story that I like to share with whomever has asked me to do that involves something we all do. I'm sure all of us have been to the doctor before. And, what if you walked into the doctor's office, sat down, and the doc said, you know what, Maddie, I'm just going to save you some time today. Here's a script. The last 5 patients that I've had today have a sinus infection. So here's some medicine for a sinus infection. And you're sitting there going, but my foot hurts.
Yep.
What in the world are you going to do as a patient? Thinking, David mentioned this earlier in his keynote about just be illegal for a doctor to do something like that. So when we sit down and we are trying to understand our customers and we're trying to stand out, a lot of times the connections that we're making in those conversations involve listening, understanding, and being unforgettable. So it could just be a quick connection that you've made with somebody. Somebody in the chat earlier said when Maddie said she was from Wisconsin, she's from Wisconsin too. I'm from Wisconsin as well. So, there's something that we could kind of play with a little bit and maybe try and make some sort of a connection. There's overdoing that as well. But I think, if you can kind of encourage people to buy software from me, Sarah, not from the company that I'm representing today, I think that's a great way to begin that conversation.
Absolutely. People buy from people. They don't buy from, if you go and order software, that's fine, but you're going to miss a lot of things. So they kind of depend on us to be that person to make that connection, to walk them across the bridge. I know that's like a common thing that we say in pre-sales. Paul, anything you want to add to this one?
Yeah, I think that, and I said it before in a couple of webinars that we did here, but demo is really about transfer of ownership. It's about your prospect imagining themselves in your product. And you can't do this if you do a generic demo, because everybody in front of you is going to be different. So you need to find a way to get to that point where, like when you're buying a house, when you start imagining where you're going to hang out the TV and put the couch to hang out, right? That's where you want to get. You want to get into that feeling. And that requires tailoring the experience to your audience, not making too many assumptions, but tailoring the experience to your audience.
Definitely. And so if we are kind of on that tailored approach, what elements do you think would really create those like wow factors for your demos? If you have specific examples, please share. Paul, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to you just kind of for you to continue that same kind of thought track, probably moving away from the couch and the TV scenario, but I'll let you go ahead and get started.
A little bit of an aside, every design thing that I see about, like, those when they redo the houses, they always redo the living room with no room for the TV. I never understood it. So
I know.
that's my controversial take on this. But anyway, I don't know. One factor about the demo, I think for me, it's nailing why we are doing the demo first, right? And what I like to do is start my demos by stating my understanding so far of the problem. Like, hey, this is what I prepared. This is what I heard. This is what I plan on covering. Would you like to add anything else? That prevents the story that I was saying earlier, where I started going ham into data governance, then realizing, yeah, I would like to talk about data security. So I'm not doing this again. So for me, if you start by stating where you're going to be and actually address what your audience wants to address, you are already winning. And there's a lot of people that are not doing this. So it doesn't have to be super complicated, but start with this. But then at the end of it, I always add something like, one last thing or something that's completely outrageous compared to what other pieces of software can do. And that's where I end the demo. And that's, for me, it's a wow moment when I show something that is completely magical, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So start by actually addressing what you need to address, and then keep something in the end. That's where I run my demo.
I think one of the things that you said was, this isn't like revolutionary things, but not everybody's doing it. And so if you're mindful of that and you kind of take that approach, that's also going to help you stand out from your competitors. Just being a little bit different, just showing that you're thoughtful, showing that you're prepared makes a big difference there. Rue, any kind of things to add on specifics on how you kind of create those, or suggest that your, people go ahead and create some wow moments in their demos?
Yeah, so two things immediately come to mind. One of the nice things about getting out of pre-sales and sales directly and now training is, I run a business and people are trying to sell to me. And so I've sat through demos now. And what was super interesting, I always did this as an SE, but I never knew how powerful it was, is I get on this call and the sales rep had customized their PowerPoint and had alpha pre-sales on it on the very first slide. And it was amazing because I'm naturally like a skeptical person, but I get into that meeting and I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the sales pitch. I'm kind of like, got my guard up, and she just shows that. And immediately I felt myself like my guard went down, and I'm thinking, okay, now I'm much more receptive to what she's going to say. And it was something where, like, I always did that as a sales engineer. I customized the demo a little bit around that, but that takes literally 1 minute to do. And it has that impact of making me go from trying to figure out what's wrong with this product to what's right with this product and how can I buy it. So something that simple is something that you can do. One tailored little thing.
Yeah. It's the little things make a difference, because all the little things will add up to like one big thing. And that's what really kind of the mindset, I think, as we're going out and as we're going through and giving these tips, none of these are massive things that are going to totally win the deal over on itself. But once you start to add in all of these little factors and stack them up on top of each other, that's when you're going to start to really gain those wow moments and be remembered and kind of stick out as you kind of go up against your competition. Sarah, anything you want to go ahead and add to this topic here before we move on?
Yeah, I think I just add a quick story that helped me frame in my mind, really when I go to bed every night, what makes me feel good about the job that I did today. And in many ways, that's connecting with the clients that we're working with, having a good conversation, having them be thrilled and happy about something that we've brought to that table. I had a client last week who you could tell he was really struggling with some sort of a new process that was our bread and butter. It's what we do day in and day out. And when you have somebody who's struggling and you can come in and say, been there, done that, here's what we would recommend in these circumstances. And PS, maybe here's something you haven't quite thought about yet. This guy literally threw something up in the air and was so happy that he had somebody, it was almost like he wanted to go get a drink and, just unpack his day. He kind of had developed this rapport with us, or we had developed this rapport with him where he felt super comfortable, felt like we had his back, we understood his industry, we were speaking the same language, and that we understood not only the challenges he knows about right now, but we can also help him navigate some of the challenges that are to come. So again, when you have that initial information up front and can can really work with that discovery that you have organically, I think you start making connections, and that to me is the wow factor.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of when you start to listen, I think we've talked about active listening a lot today. I've heard it come up in like every session. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit as well. But one of the things from my side, I'll share a little story as well. I was doing a discovery call, and I was listening to the discovery call. Actually, our rep ran it, and the prospect kept saying business partners, business partners, business partners. And that's what they call their employees, which I work at an LMS company. We do onboarding, upskilling, retraining, leadership development, all of the things, we can handle that. And we usually say users or learners or your employees, but they kept referring to them as business partners, which is not a natural way for me to explain how our end users would work. But I made a very, very conscious effort to include just that small little tweak in the demonstration. And it really helped them envision the platform, because now when we were watching demos, features are probably pretty similar, but what I call something is probably going to be different than what my competitors call a feature, and it can be different. And especially if you're in early stages, it's really, really easy to get people confused and situations confused. And so I'm now trying to get you on board with my logo, my jargon, my kind of lingo. And now you're kind of like trying to piece that together. So when I was able to, I made that connection of, this is what your business partners will see. When your business partners on their first day, they'll see the welcome business partner. We're so excited to see you here, path or whatever. And I made sure that I added that as much as I could so that they could really envision what this would look like without having to make all these leaps and jumps between my logo or my lingo and what I'm saying versus what they're thinking in their mind. They kind of are playing catch up most of the demo. So when you find some opportunities to sneak in where their talk, where their lingo comes into play, that's really going to help, add that little wow factor and make you memorable, at least, and make them feel like, oh, hey, I remember you, and you kind of get us, and you're going to be able to help us with our problems. So kind of with that in mind, I said I was watching a discovery call. It's almost like I set some of these questions up after I talked. So I watched the discovery call from my rep. Sales, whether it's account executives, whether it's the product team, other SEs, or your sales leadership, anybody on your team that you need to loop in, their collaboration is so, so important when you actually think about crafting this unforgettable customer experience and delivering these like world-class demos to your different prospects. So Paul, I'll go ahead and kick this over to you. How do you actually think about that when you loop in your teams? How do you pull them into crafting this world-class kind of demo for your prospects?
It's gonna sound weird, but just rehearse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people do rehearse enough. I think that we have prep calls where we talk about what was talked about in the disco call and sort of the points that we are trying to set up. But especially when you work with a new rep, like you don't know how the flow is going to go. If you bring somebody else that you don't know from product, you don't know how this stage is going to work. And so I haven't found, and I've built a lot of pre-sales organization. I haven't found a better way to deliver a world-class demo than rehearsing with your rep. It's just do a mock call. People don't do this. Don't do this enough. Like I know people are doing this, but I know I'm not doing it enough. Like I know that sometimes I'm crushing times, I'm not doing it enough. But every time I had done it, it's just made so much of a difference, right?
Yeah.
So this is my recommendation: is really like force yourself to plan not only to review what we have done so far, but what you're going to do during the call. Rehearse that, and what is the expected outcome of this call, like the best outcome that you can get out of the call.
Yeah.
If people do this more, I feel it would be a world of a difference.
Yeah, I think that's a super great tip, and I can openly admit I don't do it enough either. I think, we're all busy and we kind of get stuck in our calendars, but it's definitely something that we should dedicate and carve out some more time to do, because it comes across as you care about the prospect and you're polished and you all are on the same page kind of going into those different conversations and demos. Sarah, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to kind of add on to this. How do you loop in your other counterparts?
I think probably the first step is, at least in my mind, is to make sure that what I know I'm transferring over to them. And depending on who I'm looping in, it can be different pieces of information, but the end game is so that we can put together a polished presentation. So if I'm pulling in a solution architect or somebody from our support team, what components of what I know already are going to be most beneficial to them. So I'm distilling the discovery that I have to pull in those people and really lean on their expertise, because that's why I have them there. They're filling a gap that I can't provide, or expertise that I don't have. The second thing that I would probably make sure that I do is, I've worked with a few AEs. I've worked with a ton of AEs that I was aligned with. Sometimes you have to balance. You have to figure out, maybe I have 40 AEs right now. How am I gonna work with 40 of you? I can't do tons and tons of prep for every single demonstration that we put together. So, kind of sorting out, how do I do that in a way that's meaningful, that's helpful, yet we still kind of move the needle forward. And sometimes it comes down to working with the willing, which can be kind of controversial, but people who are going to reciprocate that help and accept that help, because not all AEs do. And then also trying to figure out how to balance where the right resources are coming into play. So the last thing I want to do is pull in somebody who doesn't need to be there, because they get kind of irked by that too. And I've spent that relationship a little bit. And maybe next time I ask for some help, they're not going to help me. So I think all of us just being prepared is probably going to make sure that deal gets moved forward as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, I want to.
No, go ahead, Paul.
I'm looking a lot of stuff in the chat, and you're right. Like, the ideal scenario is when you get to rehearse and doing all that kind of stuff. But you made a very good point, and I see it in the chat where people are saying, "I have zero time to do any of this." The component that I didn't talk about, it's obviously about prioritization, right? There's and you get kind of this instinct about, like, this is where I need to spend some time on, this is where I not need to spend some time on. And I saw something in the chat also earlier saying about not all demos must be tailored. I tend to agree with this, right? That you do, like, it's a zero-sum game, and you're gonna have to make some choices. And I think the best SEs figure out how to prioritize their work and where to put their energy. And that's a different skill. My perspective here is, what would you need to do in order to create the best demo, right? Knowing that there's always going to be competing priorities. Right?
Yeah. And tailoring a demo doesn't mean you have to customize a platform from A to Z, totally skin it out. It can just literally mean tailoring the way you message that. Like the business partners example, you can take your kind of sandbox run-of-the-mill demo, but still have a tailored message. So there's also kind of a difference when you think of tailoring. There's different levels, and to your point, Paul, you can definitely decide on what priority level that deal or that logo size, like where that lies in your agenda. But there's different ways to kind of approach a customized, tailored approach to the demos. Yeah.
Agreed.
Rue, I'm going to kind of kick it over to you, because you kind of have some notes in here about when you were a sales rep and kind of how you worked with your SEs. So I think that this is kind of a nice other side of the coin view to this conversation of looping in your team.
Yeah, for sure. The best sales engineering experience is to go be a sales rep for a little while. It takes you about a month to realize that no one wants to listen to you anymore, and they just want to listen to the sales engineer. But actually, if anybody has been a sales rep before, drop it in the chat. I'm super curious. I will talk about, when I was a sales rep, I was able to realize that the true salesperson, and I don't mean this like you're selling the customer, but the true salesperson on the team is the sales engineer or solution consultant. And what I mean by that is, when you think from the customer's perspective, what the sales rep says and does not convince them or have what Paul said, that transfer of ownership. They don't envision themselves seeing and using the product. The person that they make that switch for the customer is the solution consultant. And so when I was a sales rep, my goal was to make sure that my SC was 100% confident walking into that meeting, because I knew what I said really didn't matter. It just mattered what he or she said. So the smart sales reps know that, and they'll know, like, my mindset was, I work for my SC. But other ones, they'll, maybe they haven't had a lot of experience working with SEs. They're not quite there. So my suggestion is this: before you ask for a collaboration, whatever it is, just meet your sales rep and say, what can I do to help you be more effective? What role do you want me to play in this sales process? And if you start doing that early on, you'll find out the people that are going to say, I'm going to do my PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to zone out and not listen to anything while you're doing your demo. And that's fine if that's the way the sales rep operates. But there are certain ones that'll tell you, look, I don't really know what's going on here. This is a really technical audience. I could really use your help kind of filling in the gap and maybe taking some more responsibility than just the demo. And then you say, great. And now what I could use from you is, and then you talk about it. You know, I need the prep call beforehand, not because I don't expect you to ask the questions, but because when the customer tells me what they care about, and then I can, in my demo, call back, hey, Paul, you asked about this last week on our prep call. Here it is. Paul is sold because you just listen to him and you talk to him about something specific.
And just
So,
said his name.
yeah,
Just said his name.
exactly. And so just getting that, letting your sales rep know how you can be successful, but don't go in with that. Ask them first, let them talk, and then it's a two-way street. So that's my suggestion for working with AEs that maybe don't quite get it, that you're kind of the salesperson or you're the one that gets the customer to buy.
Yeah. When I started at 360, I was the only sales engineer for all of North America. So I had a lot of account executives. We're still, relatively new in a startup in the States. So we have a lot of growth there, but that also means that my sales reps aren't super tenured either. So when I was going through and doing my preps, I didn't have time to do run throughs, to that kind of point earlier. And so what I've done is I always make sure I have my agenda planned ahead of time. And I will literally highlight on the agenda when we do our prep calls, or I'll do it asynchronously. I'll highlight in the agenda, hey, this is where I need you to step in, Rue, as my account executive. Here's the question I want you to ask. Here's the value I want you to say. I need to take a break here, whatever it is. Actually planning that out and delivering that to them. You can set some expectations. Obviously, make sure you have those conversations with your account executives ahead of time of what you expect and how you're going to work with them. But it is nice to just map it out in your agenda, share that with them ahead of time, set those expectations of, hey, when I get to this point in my agenda, this is a great time for you to introduction, tell this story, or go ahead and add this little tidbit, whatever it is. But it's a really great way to involve them, a different chains of voice. Sometimes it's just maybe restate what I just said, but so that they're listening, because eventually you're going to tune out. You guys might have already tuned out to me. After you listen to somebody talk for so long, that change of voice pulls the audience back in, and you're going to go ahead and make sure that that is a memorable takeaway. And they're going to actually get the value that you're hoping that they would get from kind of that point that you're trying to drive home for them. So this next question actually was kind of one that we talked in our breakouts. So, we have all the discovery from the account executives. You've done all your discovery. You've looked at LinkedIn. You've gone through the career pages. You've looked at, the companies, financial statements, whatever you need to do. Now you have all of this info. We kind of talked about the different strategies and places to look in our breakouts, but now you get all this info. We have all those tips. How do you actually take that information and use it in your demos? What are the steps that you can actually say, here's all the information. Now I'm going to go ahead and add this, whether it's completely customizing it or just to the point that we made earlier, tailoring the words, using the correct lingo, pointing back to their mission statements. How do you actually go ahead and use all of the information you have in your prep live with the prospect? And Sarah, I'll go ahead and start with you.
So I think the way that I would start to answer that question is by thinking of your customer as some sort of a new relationship that you need to navigate a lengthy conversation with. So whether that's like meeting your partner's parents for the first time, you're on a first date and you've kind of done a little sleuthing, you're going to go meet someone who is just a friend of a friend, and that friend filled you in a little bit on what this person likes or doesn't like, so maybe some of their idiosyncrasies. Those are the kinds of things that but you're not going to just spill.
Yeah, supposed to know.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So, if my partner's parents are, this is a topic to avoid, this is a topic to engage on, this would be good to really talk about, steer clear of this one. Those are the kinds of things I think, once we have all of this discovery, what do you do with it? as you're planning out your talk track and you're thinking through those types of things, what do you share and reveal that you know? And I kind of mentioned this in our breakout as well. You know, if I do some sleuthing on one of you and I figure out something that is kind of deeply personal and I bring it up in a call, you're missing the mark there. Talk about a forgettable experience, or even one that's worse than forgettable. And I think that that's sorting through how you're going to plan out those connection points and drawing people in, because you kind of have to come in and out of software a little bit. Your talk track needs to be technical or presentation-ish in nature, but then you need to recapture the audience's attention. So how do you do that? Maybe it's by coming up with some stories or some things that you know land. I know in the last when Maddie and I first met, we were working in K-12 education, and there were lots and lots of politics afoot there in districts that we would walk into, whether it's the ousting of superintendents or huge budget crisis, or a teacher got caught sleeping on the job or something like that. There were things that we needed to know walking in to either avoid or celebrations to be had. So I think kind of collecting all of that in the most meaningful way and then working that where it's appropriate into your demonstration is probably how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, I think all of those are really good ways to go ahead and pull that in. I'm going to move on to the next one, because I think that, you know, we kind of all know that we can add in some valuable things from the discovery, but it's also super essential that we actually build empathy and understanding and really have that trust established with our clients, and that helps us build our credibility. And so how do we actually go about building that credibility, building that trust, showing genuine empathy, and showing our clients that we really actually understand their pains, their objectives, and we can actually solve them with our solution that we're selling to them? So Paul, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to kind of address this one.
Yeah. It's gonna sound stupid, but try to actually put yourself in their shoes. Like, genuinely imagine that you were working at this company and trying to solve this problem. That is just gonna make you feel so genuine, because you're actually trying to look in the same direction and solve the problem. We have a tendency of thinking about, and that can be sometimes be detrimental to the sale itself. But you are going to be so much more trusted if you say, you know what, you shouldn't be using this, not for this particular use case. There's other tools that can do this, but this is where we excel, and I think you should concentrate with this first, and there's probably other tools for this. It is so much more powerful than just trying to shove your product in somewhere that it doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
So if you actually spend the time genuinely thinking that you're not working as an SEO anymore and you've been hired by this team to solve this problem, you're going to see a world of a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of thinking about that, you know, Rue, you have here, tell them their story, not your own. Do you kind of want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's Paul, that was a perfect tee up, so thank you.
That's what I thought.
Paul said, put yourself in their shoes. So I'll give you an actual example of this. I was doing training for a HR tech company. They were specifically for selling to recruiters that were getting on-campus hires. So like early career hires, and they're going on campus to do this. So guys like, look, our product's solid, but you know, it kind of looks like a nice to have. We're not getting the traction that we need. So I was like, okay, let's see what's going on with the demos and whatever else. I was like, all right, the product's solid and everything's good, but you're not connecting with the audience. And so I said, put yourself in the recruiter's shoes. What's actually going on in their life? So you think about an on-campus recruiter, they go down to the campus, they meet with all these candidates, they have like one or two that they're super into, and then they follow up with them. They like no longer have contact, and they have some email exchanges and maybe some phone calls, and they're trying to get them hired, right? And then the candidate goes silent for 2 weeks, and then they find out that they were recruited by one of their biggest competitors, and that's why, you know, they didn't take the job. And like that feeling sucks as a recruiter. So I was like, tell that story. So this guy goes and he's in the beginning of the meeting. So this is what you're probably going through when you go on campus. He's like, you go down, you get super excited. There's one or two that you really want to work for the firm. You're super excited about it. And then they go silent. And I'm not kidding, he didn't even finish the story. A woman stops him, interrupts him, and goes, "Oh my God, I feel so heard right now." And that's the example of just tell their story, their life as they're going through it. And immediately he did not have to even sell the product at that point. Like, she's sold because he knows her life. And then everything he sells or shows is a solution to that. So that's where, like, the most powerful story is your customer story, not the customer story that marketing puts together. It's your customer story that you're talking to.
Yeah. I think as long as you take that approach of keeping them in mind and relating it to them and having them feel like they're envisioning, exactly what you understand their pains. I think trusted advisor comes to mind when I heard both of you talk. It is, you're actually showing them you're this trusted advisor, whether you're advising them to maybe use a different tool or take a different path, or just being that trusted advisor, like, hey, I hear you, I get you. This is how we can go ahead and help you actually meet those needs. So, I mean, we've talked about kind of personalization and tailoring experiences. I'm skipping down a question here, but the personalization theme, when it comes to go ahead and creating these memorable customer experiences, it doesn't always have to be taking it and taking it to the completely white label from A to Z, filling in all of the things. Obviously, we can do that, but kind of what are some of those things that you will do to make sure that your demo is going to actually resonate with your clients when you think about personalization and customization without having to go to the nines and totally blow it out? I think it is also important to note that even if you have the time to do that, don't do it too much, because if you're too close, they can get stuck on all the little details. Well, we would never call it that, actually. We would maybe call it this or call it that. And there's no amount of discovery that kind of steer you away from that. So make sure you're kind of reining it in and doing some self-checking, even if it's just, hey, other SE on my team, can you just jump on and make sure I haven't just completely gone over the rails on this demo prepper, or just doing a nice little temperature check with somebody else in your team, whether that be an SE or the AE, to kind of gauge on where you are in that kind of personalization process, I think is really going to be a helpful one. Sarah, I'll go ahead and kind of hand it over to you to address this one.
I think really the point that you made, Maddie, about not going too into depth is really important for me to remember. That was a good reminder. You can quickly and easily get stuck, and it just makes your software look that much more complex and complicated to use. I think also figuring out where that happy medium is between staying as high level as you possibly can, yet answering the questions that they have. Make them draw you deeper into the software instead of you just assuming they want to see some back-end configuration, for example. So touching on as high level as you possibly can, being an active listener, really, I think we've all mentioned that throughout our time here today, and listening to what's important to them. The last thing you want to do is start talking about something and they're like, yeah, we're never going to need that or use that. That is definitely a swing and a miss if you wind up doing that. And really, engaging, figure out like how the brain works and what keeps people's attention. So when you're watching commercials, or when you're out in the community, you're walking into Costco and somebody tries to get you to switch your cell phone plan, what sales techniques work for you? Because you are, in all practical purposes, a consumer as well. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? And then maybe what parts of something really did work, but that part just didn't. We're all consumers, and so I think we can take and leverage that and make things resonate with clients that much better.
Yeah, I think, Paul, you and Sarah both kind of mentioned previously about, kind of missed, Sarah, you just did, and Paul earlier, kind of missing the mark, or going in and talking to the total around group, and Sarah, you just swing and a miss. So that kind of leads me to this next question of, when you're prepping and you're demoing to the customer, and you've now totally have to adapt on the fly to meet their needs. You uncovered something, you've asked a discovery question, and it's totally taking you down a different route, or you've discovered that you're demoing to the data security team. How do you actually kind of recover from that as much as possible? Or, you are on your Zoom and they luckily have their cameras on, and you're seeing somebody that's just totally sitting back, looking at their phone, not paying attention. How do you kind of adapt to be able to pull them back in and rein in that conversation?
That never happened to me. So
never?
No. So no, seriously. Honestly, you're not gonna believe this, but the audience are also human beings.
Yeah.
So
Weird.
I try to just really reach out to them as human beings. It's like, hey, we are all here to do this. Like, you probably have some interest in this. Looks like I'm missing the mark. Let's take a step back. I'm going to stop my presentation. I had this in mind. What's not working?
Mhm.
Now, I can't do this because I'm older than you think. It's been years of preparation. I have like kind of a poise, and I'm okay with doing this. It's very difficult to do when you're young in your career. But if you can confidently do this, I think it just breaks the fourth wall right away, and then you get to the real thing. And again, it gives you some credibility. I think
Yeah.
when you see things that are derailing, just address it. Just addressing head first, and you'll see the right results.
Yeah, and I think that the radical conversation, I mean, it's maybe not necessarily a radical conversation, but I think it is an uncomfortable conversation that not a lot of us are ready to have early on in our career. But I think to your point, Paul, it's once you can step out of your comfort zone and have some uncomfortable conversations, it's one just going to strengthen you as an SE, but it's going to help kind of control your deals and bring them back in and make sure that you're actually connecting with the prospect, even if you got off the rails a little bit. One of the things I like to do is I like to plan for contingencies. So I have some contingency plans in place. If I know if I ask a question that question could go one of two ways, I either kind of have that prepped in my demonstration if it is something that needs to be demoed, or I have a follow-up question, that if they say no, how do I address that no? All right, well, what do we need to go ahead to do to actually see you envision using this platform? But having some kind of contingency plans in place, I think, is also really helpful to go in confidently. I think Rue, you mentioned that earlier of like, I want my account exec or my SE to be confident going into those deals and going into those conversations. And for me, sometimes it really just means planning for some contingency plans going in. And if this goes off the rails, how do I actually kind of rein that back in and pull that back in? I know we just have one more minute, so I know I just saw that there are some questions in the Q&A, so we can go ahead and I'll answer some of those asynchronously as well. I think Sarah, Rue, Paul, if you want to go ahead and chime in on those, we can definitely do that. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for kind of participating, and I hope everybody really found some value in our conversation today. And whether you take everything or just a little things, or just kind of judging on how much time you have for that prospect or who that prospect is, I think is really going to help you kind of add those wow moments and integrate them into your demonstrations. I'm right? It's 1:50. That's our end time.
You are correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I was waiting for you to pop back in, Chris. Awesome.
Massive round of applause to you guys. Thank you so much. So many great golden nuggets that I'm walking away with. I appreciate your time. Maddie, Paul, Sarah, Rue. Really appreciate you guys.